even if it's hyperbolic, a complaint could still be a fantastic feature in disguise if you are willing to dig into it and maybe split it out into its most common theme and then see, okay, is that a swathing feedback online? Am I seeing more of that? If you focus on how negative or hyperbolic the actual feedback is, you might miss something really good.
I think, especially in context of like multiplayer games, there is a lot of design decisions that have a huge fallback and then huge kind of effect onto how you're going to build what you're building, and no decision is made in isolation. If I decide that, hey, I want to have these like 100 little monsters attacking the players, like, okay, actually they have to be controlled by the server, and suddenly the game is incredibly hard to scale and incredibly hard to run. And any multiplayer game actually is incredibly hard to test as well. It's weird because like you want to be free with your ideas, but at the same time, when the paper is blank, and it's like, make a game. What kind of game? What is the platform? Who are you making it for? Do we have a brand? It's actually much easier and more fun actually to be tasked with some kind of definition, like, hey, you're making a Transformers game, which is a build and battle title, for example. That was the brief on my previous title. So okay, that immediately narrows it down, and we can focus on our innovation, and we can focus our strength, like to play to our strengths, and we know what we're building, so we don't have to find that. We know there is an audience that we can address. So it makes it much easier. But yeah, it will depend on the company and the time and the position where you're at. But sometimes you have total freedom, which is very daunting and scary. And sometimes you have almost no freedom at all. Like, hey, let's make another Call of Duty. You know exactly what you're building. And then you're focusing on innovation elsewhere, and you're thinking about the actual structure and the content. It's more of an execution play as opposed to innovation play.
My job is to figure out what constraints we're operating within and effectively the problems we're trying to solve. So as we're figuring out what the game's going to be, what the product's going to be, not just from a gameplay point of view, but bringing in brand and community and all the components that go into a game. What ingredients have we got to work with, where we're trying to enter the market, and continuing to try and answer those questions to empower our designers, our engineers, etc., to make the best decisions of the right context. That's really what my team are there to do.
My day-to-day tends to be quite fluid, from feeding into everything that you guys described, from like feature prioritization to like brand positioning, communicating things like patch notes, bugs, problems and issues, proactively sourcing feedback, trends when it comes to like sentiment and stuff like that. But also helping with like future roadmap prioritization, what's really good for a live game in terms of like your 6 months and 1 year based on how your game has landed. And also balancing reception and sentiment with business needs and like actual upcoming changes that sometimes they can be really tricky to communicate. So that is pretty much my focus. It's amazing how every single social media has its own generalized tone of voice when it comes to giving game feedback. Like it is a joke online sometimes about like, you know, oh, Reddit sounds this way and Discord this way and Twitter this way. But in that vein, all feedback is valid, no matter the forums or channels or means it's delivered necessarily. There's comments that through common sense, you can think that's completely counterproductive. Why would I surface that to my devs if it's just, there's nothing to learn from it? But even if it's hyperbolic, a complaint could still be a fantastic feature in disguise if you are willing to dig into it and maybe split it out into its most common theme and then see, okay, is that a swathing feedback online? Am I seeing more of that? If you focus on how negative or hyperbolic the actual feedback is, you might miss something really good.
It's, I think community is part of it. That's one tool you have. Then you have the team itself, and then you have the analytics. So everything that players do informs us and gives us pure data on whether they are completing certain challenges or quests, or they're skipping, or they're not using certain tools at all. So what we do is we use community, but we also have to be careful what they're wishing for, because very often you'll be speaking to people who are the most engaged players, and they're like the super fans. And what they want is they want more like ranking and like hardcore features, like I want the leaderboards, I want to compete against the top players. But actually, 90% of people don't care about it. They just leave the game because the tutorial is way too hard, for example. So we have to marry the analytics, the kind of quantitative data, with the qualitative from community. And then we look at that and we see where the issues are, where things are not used, let's say, frequently enough, for people not completing certain things. Then here's the things they want, that say they want. Here's what they're actually doing. And here's what we think will make the game better.
Yeah.
And it's a constant kind of balancing act. And I'm pretty sure Alex is kind of losing sleep over it. It's like, okay, which things do we prioritize? Do we try to make these players happy here? Do we actually try to help these players stay in the game? Or do we do what the game team wants to do, which is this feature that they believe will make players' lives better? I just think like when it comes to feedback, be it from community or be it from players or be it people from the team, I found that very often you have to go through the veneer of what they're saying. Like, I don't like this character. This character feels weak. And then you have to kind of decode that message and you have to ask, oh, why is it that it feels weak? Is it, the way that the tool works? Is it something else? Is it the balancing, or is it just the aesthetics? It could be the sound, like could be just the weapon doesn't sound right, and that's why it feels weak. So I think a lot of what my job comes down to is trying to actually understand what people mean behind all of these messages and which dial to turn and how to change content, how to rebalance stuff, because it might be that they're complaining about one thing, but actually it's a completely different source of the problem.
Yeah.
I think something we've spoken about consistently is how much of a team effort it is to reduce this kind of feedback into possible features, roadmap adjustments. And also, it's important to remember in our context, we are also a children's game. So there's a lot of audience we're never going to hear the voices of in an online context.
Sure.
It's just not going to happen. So sifting that kind of feedback, for me, is really easy. It's not easy necessarily to understand the root of their problem, but it's definitely easy to reduce it down into what the possible pain point is. I'm a massive fan of something called jobs to be done theory, which is that Henry Ford idea of people don't know what they want or what they don't want, they know how something makes them feel.
Yeah.
So at least from a community perspective, I can say, for example, players are not having as much fun on this particular thing at the moment, and then perhaps analytics could see what the adoption is of that particular thing. Perhaps we can see how well marketing messages have landed from it from a sentiment perspective. We can check and see if there's any, at its root, are there bugs with it, or is it simply how it functions? Could we try testing sound changes? And it's as a group effort, you finally figure out what that experience might be.
Okay, so we're heading towards main launch. We've crossed several hurdles to get here. It's maybe that week beforehand. How are you preparing for the storm ahead that you know is coming when suddenly the lights turn on and everyone starts pouring in that first week before we get to the launch itself? What are you most focused on?
Yeah, hopefully if you're at your last week, you're doing nothing because you're just like everything is submitted and ready and then you're just waiting to press the button. But what you have done before that is you try to hack your own game. We try that.
Yeah.
Especially in context multiplayer games, right? We try to hack ourselves. So we make sure that's stable. We try to DDoS ourselves. So we storm our own servers with hundreds of thousands of bot accounts, and we basically use our own servers to attack our own servers by just playing the game. So too many games in the past have fallen over, had a great launch, great success, and what you're doing is looking at a queue or looking at a
Suddenly
the server is offline.
Basically,
and that's because they didn't anticipate the popularity, or they didn't anticipate the success that it would have. That, you're actually having 10 million active users right now, and 9 million of them cannot be fit on your servers because you didn't scale them enough. Yeah. So the word for that is load testing. We do it months before to prepare for that scale. So you turn all these servers on and in anticipation of the players. You have your community guidelines. You know how to compensate players if something bad happens, how to ban players who are really going to break your rules in a massive way, how to tackle hacking. So hopefully all of this is prepped and you're ready to accept.
It's launch day, right? I'm going to start with you, Adam, right? What's going on launch day? What is it you're doing?
Yeah, so if I was my game lead, I would be at 4 a.m. looking at stats.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Discord and Twitter and playing the game and seeing how it is as an actual player. And then hopefully trying to put some distance between what's happening right now, because there's a lot of noise and a lot of the analytics are not reliable yet. Community sentiment is all over the place. You don't know yet what's going to happen. So I'm trying to build the next great thing so that when they ask for this new edition, hopefully it will align with what I've been making in my little workshop and trying to get ahead. Because the moment you launch, even in soft launch or global launch, you put yourself on a timer very often with a live product. And yeah, Alex's head is probably done in like, what's the battle pass 3 months from now? What is gonna go in it? Have we tested it? Is the art ready? Is the animations ready? Do we have a build that's gonna come and include it? So there's a lot of prep work. This is basically, you have a clock over your head the moment that happens, and you have to continue try to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, it feels like maybe on the path to launch feels like this glorious end of the tunnel, and then when you get there, you find out there's just loads more tunnel. You know,
there's 2 tunnels now.
Yeah.
There's the one that you're trying to like make the game better, and the other ones you're trying to keep whatever is there alive.
In that initial launch window, if you are looking at millions and millions and millions, there is an element of knowing it's going to be a while until you see proper quantifiable, actionable feedback. So like, usually at launch it goes like this. I'll be sitting there and I'll be like, wow, it's going really well. And then in about 20 minutes I'll go, oh no, it's going terribly. And then another 20 minutes I'll go, actually it's great. And you'll go like that for 24 hours as that floodgate kind of goes through the same emotions of getting a new game and playing with it. I will be lurking constantly on all those channels, and if I see things like clearly quantifiable bugs, I will prioritize it, how many people are affected. We have clear guidelines for that kind of thing. At launch, usually, when you're talking high severity, you're talking, is it playable? So then other stuff, you follow a process and put that, to prioritize post-launch, either patches or a future release.
Yeah.
I'm usually surprised by balancing of things, because the things I find completely like broken, people think they're weak, for example, or the other way around, where they cling to this one unit and like, why are you using this? You have better things available.
Yeah.
But they just grown in a sentiment in the community that this is super strong, and that's what they'll cling to. So that always surprises me. Also, the ways in which community finds ways to break the game, that's always surprising. And like something like, hey, we've coordinated 18 people to like try and score the most, and like we've scored 50,000 points in a game where you're supposed to score 1,000. Like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
So like seeing how creative people are, that is always a surprise, because they think about things that even the most seasoned quality assurance veterans have not thought of. Yeah, we have one superpower, however, in the mobile world. Is very often we will sneakily release a game under a different name in a different country, like everyone does it. And that will be our alpha, and nobody will know it exists. And hopefully, if it has a huge brand like Warhammer, Total War, like there's no way we can like redress it and call it something different and then try it. But on mobile, we can, if you're not like super obviously branded, you can, if you're doing a new IP, you can test it in a small territory. You can see who is actually clicking, who's actually playing, who's actually engaging. And that will, you can do it very early on, like months into the development, 6, 8, 9 months in. And then you can learn a lot and hopefully inform your actual release. So that's a superpower in the mobile space. It's much difficult to do on console and PC.
I wouldn't expect a designer to sit there and look through lines and lines and lines and lines of in-game data telling people about their exact degree movements or every single purchase that's ever made. You wouldn't expect them to do that. That is tons of raw data that needs to be shaped and understood and transformed into an insight that, to Bee's point, is actionable and useful and contextualized. The exact same thing applies for any sentiment reporting or any discursive channel. You are going to see lots of uncontextualized, unfettered raw data that takes forms in spicy tweets. So being able to contextualize that and not trying to do that in isolation, because you wouldn't be expected to do that with any other form of data, and just because it's readily available in your personal life doesn't mean that it's then any more valid than this person purchased this one thing, therefore we should make millions of it.
Yeah.